Hey Jen, we are live again on a little bit of history. Now last week we talked about the
Maxim machine gun.
Maxim machine gun. Now he walks back in and he said, "Hey, guess what I found for you today? What is it?"
It's another Maxim machine gun.
Now does this look like the Maxim machine gun I remember seeing last week? Absolutely not.
Well, during World War I, the one we've seen was the MG08, was a German service machine gun.
So we might have to talk a little bit louder. So just so you know, today we have church training and we have a lot of people in here. So if you guys can't hear us, I absolutely apologize for that, but we'll do our best. Next week we got fancy little microphones that are going to help us. So go ahead.
So anyway, when the war started, the Germans, you've seen how big, if you watched last week's video, the gun and the tripod weighed like 100 pounds or better, was all put together. They wanted a lighter machine gun, for advanced. The 08 was good for defensive, but they wanted something better for the assault. They could move better and move around. Well, they didn't have a lot of time in the middle of the war, so they took the Maxim machine gun, the MG08, and they done everything they possibly could to make it lighter.
So guys, definitely check out our earlier video because we're going to refer to that a lot. So I apologize if you want to, if you're watching this later, just stop, watch our old video, and then watch this video. But last week we had almost the exact same gun with modifications, but it was on a big, like a sled.
It was on a sled mount, yes.
All right, so let's go back to this. What is the model of this particular?
Okay, this is an MG08/15. And
what's the /15?
The /15, it was adopted in 1950.
1950. So when we talked about the first Maxim with the big sled,
it came out in 1908.
1908. So if you guys ever look at this again, if you see a -15, that's the light
version.
Light version. Okay.
Yeah. Now this is actually the first quote-unquote light belt-fed machine gun ever made. Now,
quote, because you can carry it with one person on their back like a sling. Right.
Actually, you would use a sling, and you could Rambo it with a sling. If you
had to be a pretty good guy. And well, even at that time, I don't believe that a lot of people were big. You know what I'm trying to say, for the most part. And they probably picked the big guy and said, "This is you."
Yeah, and well, the gun with water in the belt box and everything weighs 52 pounds. So, but what they done is they took the 08, and if you remember, the receiver was squared off here and here.
Yes, well, that's what you said when you came out. I'm like, that doesn't even look the same.
Well, this was wasted space in the 08. There was nothing in there. It was just open inside. So they just eliminated that. They made these side plates a little thinner so they wouldn't be quite as heavy. The water jacket is a lot smaller diameter. The barrel's the same length, and the water jacket is a little thinner diameter. They've done that to cut the weight down. And if you look at the water jacket on this, you'll see all kinds of dents in it. This gun probably seen heavy use sometime or another. Like I say, the jacket was thinner and it was easier to bend up.
Again, just to be home to the point, it's made to be the lighter gun too.
Right.
When they were going through, I'm assuming, World War I.
This was a World War I gun, and they used them in World War II also.
Okay, so I guess in World War II, would this have been the gun they would have used, or would it have been
This would have been a substitute. They wouldn't. Actually, they were both obsolete. And the second line troops, the front line troops from World War II had MG34s or 42s. Okay. But the second line troops would have had either these or the 08, depending on where they were. If they were in a fixed position, they would use the MG08, the heavy gun, for a fixed position, and they would have used this.
So it's this time in the episode here that I'd like to start from the front, go back and kind of tell us the key points about each mechanism, and then I will kind of zoom in here, and you can kind of tell me the different points on what makes that unique from maybe this gun to the 08.
Well, this is actually what they call the flash suppressor and blast booster. It would direct a muzzle blast up against the face of the barrel to make the barrel recoil more, because it is a recoil operated gun. That is basically the same as the 08. The water jacket's the same as the 08. Basically, it works exactly like the MG08. Matter of fact, a lot of the parts will actually interchange. The barrels are the same.
Nice.
The locks are the same. And I'll pull the lock out of it. We didn't show you that last week, but they're the same. We'll pull it out on the floor. There we go. And this is actually, they call it the lock, we would call it the bolt. This is actually the firing mechanism, the firing pins in here, the firing pin spring. This is a cocking lever. This is part of the toggle. They work on a toggle action. But anyway.
So why would they call it a lock instead of a bolt, I guess, like what we would call it?
Well, like I say, at that time,
It's more complex than a bolt.
well, if you look out here, this is your toggle. This, when the gun goes into battery, this comes up. This lifts this up, lines the cartridge up with the barrel. This is your secondary sear. When it goes into battery, it trips that. You hear it click. Get out here so it don't bite me. This is actually the sear your trigger operates. And if you watch this, just fired. So there's two sears, and when it opens up, it cocks it, goes back together.
Cool.
Anyway,
Don't shoot pins with it?
no. Anyway, but that's basically the same, and we'll go in here, and they use the same belt, but they come up with this, and this is called a belt drum. These are actually, the only gun they'll fit is the 08 15s. So if you wanted to shoot the gun on
John,
this,
grab that camera for me if you would real quick and kind of bring it over closer to where we are so you guys can see kind of what we're talking about. We're one cameraman down here for a minute.
well, this is what they call the belt Boggs. And I'll open it up here if you guys can see.
Let me get this off here. I apologize for the camera work, but we are down one guy right now.
So this opens up, and this is a spool, and you would roll a loaded belt up on this spool. It's a 100-round belt. Of course, the belt itself would be loaded. And this attaches to the gun, like such. So then you would have a 100-round belt. This would you put over your shoulder, and you could fire it from the hip or there, or it was also your carrying strap.
So would this be a gun that they would have necessarily laid down in the prone position?
They always lay down in the prone position.
Okay.
Now, if you didn't have this, the same belt that fit the MG08, the belts are the same. The MG08 belt was 250 rounds, which wouldn't fit in the drum, would be excessively heavy, but they use both belts in these guns.
It's the exact same belt compared to the 08 that we checked out last week.
Right, and actually, it's the same belt that the British Vickers machine gun uses.
Which would have been at the same time or later? I can't remember.
Same
About
time.
the same time.
And if you want to hear Chapter 3, I say this is Chapter 2 on Maxim gun. The Vickers machine gun that could be Chapter 3, because Vickers machine gun is a modified Maxim.
Maybe it's something we can talk about next week.
But it loads just like the other. Now, this is what they call a starter tab. So you can get in there and you would slip it in through the feed block, like such. You'd pull it up till the cartridge stops, and it was just like the Maxim. You have to cock it twice, then pull it over. But it worked the same way. So then your belt would feed out of this.
So how many rounds would I have had in there, and what caliber would it have been?
It was the same as the MG08,
Which is
7.92 by
8
50
millimeter Mauser.
8mm Mauser. I'm being crazy.
8mm Mauser, got it, check.
And like I say, what they done, they put a buttstock and pistol grip on
And I
it.
was going to say, this is completely different.
The receiver's the same, but instead of having the trigger back here, they just moved it up.
Right.
here.
So if you guys remember, again, I apologize that we're
It had
referring
spade
to
grips.
last week, but there were two grips right here, and
Yeah.
you would kind of toggle that,
Yeah.
so there'd be a safety and then a firing mechanism. They have actually moved that. Let me move this around.
And you would shoot it. You would shoot it basically like
Now,
a rifle.
and they have this as a standard
That's
safety.
That's a safety. Yeah.
It just you would expect kind of like a standard grip safety.
Yeah. Safety like you would have on
Or
any.
thumb safety, excuse me, not grip safety.
Yeah.
And then I bet this is a hard piece to find.
Everything's hard to find on these.
You know, like a wood checkered grip. Could you imagine trying to go?
And actually, when you shoot them,
I bet it's easier to make one than find one.
probably. that's what most of the parts
Sure.
for these guns are almost impossible to find.
So I know there's a couple parts that I wanted to talk about that I have, which is no surprise, no clue about. What am I looking at here, and what am I looking at here? John,
Okay.
come back over here. The two
Okay.
parts that we're talking about are here and here.
Okay, most of these guns, this had been what they call the steam port cover, where the steam comes out when you boil water in it. There was a cover here. This is not the original. Original steam port covers for these guns are impossible to find. Somebody had made this one.
So this
and there had been a
this is-
hose that went on there, condensing hose.
So what's it do? Does it just unbolt?
It just turns and comes off.
Oh, well, if I can do it. How do you do it? You're the professional. Oh, I just didn't want to break it. So in here would have been water.
Yeah, you would, and this is where you put the water in.
Oh, okay. So that's not a fill up. This is more of a release.
This is where the steam would come out of it when you boil water.
Okay, got it.
And this is not an original. Somebody made this one, the original steam.
What would a cap of the original cap look like?
It would be very similar. It had a little pipe that come up this high, then the condensing hose hooked on the pipe.
Okay.
Both of them are impossible.
And again, refer to last week's video because last week we talked
We had
about
the condensing.
We had the condensing,
But it was down here on
right,
there.
and we had it went around, and we had everything right there.
This would have had it too, and this would have been where you put the water in. This is just the plug where you put the.
I bet the most important part of this entire gun is right here.
Well,
That
but
piece of chain.
you keep from losing the plug.
Exactly. I bet somebody was like, if you lose this, I will kill you. So they made their chain. Now, would this have been a standard issue thing?
Oh yes,
Okay.
that was standard.
All right.
Everything.
So who would have used it? Who would have actually used this rifle in wartime?
It'd have been the German army,
Just the German army.
just the German army.
Okay. And why would it have just been the Germans? Would they? Last week we talked about Maxim. Okay. And Maxim went out and he had his patents. Then he released them to the British.
And
Okay.
then they sold them.
Then
to
they
the,
sold them to
the Germans,
and every Russians and every.
When this gun
Russians
come out,
probably
they was
stole
in the middle of the war, and they didn't worry about patents.
Right. So at this time, you would say to me, this would be completely Russian. It would have been made in a Russian factory. There's nothing.
This would have
on
been
this.
this would have been made in a German factory.
Or excuse me, German. I said
Yeah.
Russian. I apologize. It's all German. Nothing on this would have been from anywhere.
Everybody else, it was all German. And the 08 was the same way. They just built them under license. And you've heard German machine guns called Spandaus. Maybe
Yep.
you haven't heard that, but if you look on this top cover here, you'll know why, because this top cover, these guns were made in Spandau. I may not be pronouncing that right. My German's probably not very good. That's why they call them that. Actually, the 08 we had last week, for every one of those, they probably had two of these.
Really?
Because they were lighter, easier to maneuver.
But I would have figured that the other one, the 08, would have came out
It
first,
come out first.
which would have had more production.
But in
than this.
they did up until 1950. But when they come to 1950, they produced a lot more of these than they did the 08.
I wouldn't have imagined. I would have thought it would have been the opposite. I figured this would have been the rarer of the two.
No, this
because-
is actually the more common.
Really?
Yeah, by far more common.
I lost money on that bit. So
And another thing is too, on the German biplanes of World War II, this would have been the machine gun mounted on the engine cowl of the German biplanes of World War II. This would have been an aircraft gun also. They'd have took the buttstock off, the pistol grip off, and they cut holes in the water jacket.
for airflow.
For airflow. And
Okay, all right.
And this would have been what would have been
All
on
right.
the biplanes, was the 0815.
So another cool feature about this one, and I'll spin it around towards you, Basil. Sorry, that we're moving a little bit.
And they'd have had a lot longer belt. And a lot
Look
longer
right here, Basil. All right. If you look at the actual sights, they are offset. And hopefully you guys can see that down there.
We're on the 08 too.
But they are offset. Why are they offset?
Probably to clear this for one, and you don't want your face, every time this fires, this cocking handle reciprocates, so there's no left-handed shooters on these either. But every time this moves, so you want your face pretty far away from that every time that.
But how often do you think they actually, well, right-handed people, weirdos, right? How often do you think they actually got in, shouldered it, and sighted? Like, you think they actually, why
Yeah,
would they?
they have sights on them for a reason. You just don't put bullets down range expecting.
Well, for me, I'm thinking machine gun. I'm thinking these guys are just, like we talked about last week, crossing, and just wiping
This
things
would
out.
be more like a we would call it a squad automatic weapon. I don't know what the proper German term for that is. And actually, when you
Finally
shot,
stumped him, basically.
when they actually shot him,
Well, it might be a little loud. Hold on.
you grab hold like this, but you always take this hand, you put this hand like this up under here, because you don't want any part of your hand up here, because it ejects empty cases out here and they go full. If you look, the paint's all beat off that workman part. That's how I actually fire.
I don't like being over here. It wears me out. But Jan's got to get back where he's supposed to be.
Anyway.
So
But
there
every
are a lot of
time-
cool functions and features on this that are different, but exactly the same in
Right.
most cases.
And a lot of the parts will, some of the parts will change. The barrels, what wears out in the machine gun are barrels.
Obviously.
And the lock, we would call it the bolt. There's, they break firing pins, they break firing pin springs, all that kind of stuff. All those parts are in the lock. Locks, they issued them with spare locks. So if you broke anything, you just swap the lock out, and you would send
Again,
the lock
guys,
back
he's
to
saying
an arm.
lock. He's not talking about lock and key. He's talking about what we would call the bolt.
I had it out here earlier.
The bolt carrier, whatever you guys
Bolt.
want to carry or call it. That's what we're talking about. So it's a complicated mechanism. We've looked at it a couple times now. You guys would not believe the machine work that goes in to that lock.
Yeah, it's amazing that they done it with hand machines
Exactly.
at the time. The guns are very reliable. They're boringly reliable. They don't give a lot of trouble. Now, the troops that used it, they usually picked the most intelligent troops, and they spent a lot of time training them on how to keep these guns up and running and what to do with them. The machine gun crews were the cream of the infantry in all armies of that period, the British Army, the American Army, and the German Army. They picked the brightest, smartest guns because at that time, a lot of them were agriculture. The most complicated they had was a horse and a hoe. They wouldn't have had mechanical stuff.
Yeah, tractors and
Right.
everything that you would expect for a farmer.
Yeah, and at that time, so they picked the most intelligent people, and they were very highly trained and highly motivated, and that's every army from that time period.
So they were highly trained in just
this,
this.
and the second man too. There was always two men.
Now, would they have been at that time in the German army? Would have had any other belt-fed machine guns, or would this have been the one that they had?
They had the two. They had the 08 and the 08-15.
And that's it.
They had another one, but they were never issued very much. And later on, they tried to make an air-cooled version of this in 1918. And they done away with the water jacket. They put a perforated barrel jacket on, but they weren't very successful because they melted barrels down.
Right. At that point, it wouldn't be worth it because there's no air flowing through it like an airplane.
Right. And you're not up in a higher altitude when
Right.
it's cold.
So this is it. I mean, if you had to learn one thing, you had to learn this.
And you had to learn how, if you had a stoppage, this here handle will stop in different places for different kind of jams. And
So if it was here, they knew what jam that was.
Yeah, and you would go on.
That's neat. So and again, it could be me. I don't know if we talked about it yet, but like last week, we talked about the retention spring, or
Right.
what would you have called this?
Okay, this is your
So
recoil spring.
Let me
We come
spin
on-
this around so you can
We
see
talked
it.
about this a little bit last week. That your recoil spring is in here. It's under tension, not compressing. Most of your firearms, when you're like on a semi-automatic pistol, when the slide comes back, it compresses the spring and the spring pushes forward. These, when the action works, it actually pulls on the spring, and the spring is adjustable. And this is a gauge to tell you how much tension you have on the spring, and this is how you adjust it. This will move the spring back and forth. And I'll put it back where it is, but you would adjust it for different lots of ammunition, different weather conditions. When it's cold, the gun would be sluggish. You'd loosen the spring up so it would run right. Or if it was really hot, it got to running too fast, you could put more tension on the spring.
So, in closing, is there anything that you would like to bring up about the Maxim, in this configuration that you would like?
Light belt-fed machine gun ever made. Now, they were other light machine guns in World War I, but they were all magazine-fed. But this is the first belt-fed, like I say. Light's a relative term, but you compare it to the heavy machine guns it is light. It does fire from a closed bolt. The accuracy is actually quite good on them. They shoot very well. They'll shoot to MO8 groups, believe it or not. They shoot
I
well.
wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah, they shoot with good barrels and good ammunition. They shoot really well. You can change barrels in them, but that's a procedure. You have to dismantle the gun. It can be done. And, a good crew could probably do it in 3 or 4 minutes. I
crazy.
can't, but
Right.
they could.
All right, Jan. Well, guys, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. We'll be more than happy to answer them. And hopefully we'll be back next week. And I think Jan already has something planned for us for next week.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. So in the Maxim series, guys, we will see you on Chapter 3 next week about the same time.